Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
Taylor Swift is a link builder. There were rumors that she would get engaged. Our client said, let's give them a free wedding venue. And then we got them 50 links. That's digital PR.
Managing multiple clients or large websites? Automate your SEO with Ally AI. Start your free trial now.
Hello. Thank you everyone for joining us here in my favorite room in all of Brighton SEO, and for not going to the pub on this sunny Friday. Hopefully you'll get there very soon. So we'll get through this. My name is Crystal Carter. I'm the head of SEO communications. This is an exceptionally good photo that someone took of me at one of those photo booths at a conference. So if you got one of those, then you might get some great results. I do enterprise SEO projects at Wix, and I'm global thought leader. That makes me sound very grand. And I do comms leadership for Wix, and Wix Studio. So I talk to SEOs about Wix. I talk to Wix users about SEO. I get to do cool things like an SEO course, which some of our course instructors are here in the building. And we get to do cool stuff like webinars and things and articles and all sorts of stuff. And you can check them all out at wixseolearn.com or wix.com/SEO/learn. I'm also a Beyonce fan. I sometimes refer to myself as the other Mrs. Carter. And this is just an excuse for me to show you a time when I really crushed the cosplay. So that's Beyonce and that's me. I know we look exactly the same. But yes, so the other Mrs. Carter will be helping me through this talk, as you might have guessed by the name. So what we're going to cover today is why generative search engine visibility matters to us, why we're all here, why we're sort of thinking about that. We're also going to talk about how to monitor visibility, and we're going to talk about how to monetize for generative search engines. And I say that in inverted commas because they're not exactly search engines. Well, some of them are and some of them aren't, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I started looking at this topic because people kept asking me, how do I rank in ChatGPT? And I go, well, I mean, it's not the same thing. They go, well, how? But I checked myself in ChatGPT and I couldn't find myself. And I'm like, hey, I did the same thing. They didn't know who I was either. And I think that this is something that was sort of rattling around in my head. So let's get into it. So we are going to talk about brand visibility and LLMs. We are not going to talk about AI overviews. And I'll tell you why. Just in case you're wondering, like, honestly, what? I thought you were going to talk about AI overviews. No, the difference is user journeys. So people use LLMs for search. I know we say they're not search engines, but essentially a search engine is a way for you to find something that you're looking for. And sometimes people use LLMs for that. But people sort of just have AI overviews in search. They might be searching, but they're not necessarily looking for an AI overview. So they're not exactly the same. Similarly, users choose LLMs for search. They go to the ChatGPT website to look for information, and users just happen upon AI overviews. They just show up or they don't, and they just sort of happen. So again, they're not exactly the same. Similarly, users interact with LLM responses. So if you get a feedback from a ChatGPT and it tells you some bad information, you can ask a follow-up question. You can ask them, no, I still don't know what that word means. You can follow up with them on those sorts of things. And users just receive content from AI overviews. So they're not the same because essentially you get an AI overview. If you don't like it, there's not really a follow-up conversation yet. So they're different. We're talking today about optimizing for LLM brand visibility. And that's essentially the process of increasing references to a brand or website in LLM responses. And I'm sure that someone's come up with a better phrase for that. We might have something more concrete going on in the future, but that's what we're going to work with today. So why does brand visibility matter in LLMs? It comes down to numbers. And I know that people are saying that people aren't leaving Google to go to ChatGPT, but the numbers are pretty consistent and they just continue to rise. So ChatGPT, I checked on SimilarWeb for August, was pulling in 2.6 billion monthly visits and around 9 billion monthly page views, 6 minutes per session. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time people's day that people are giving to ChatGPT. And then when we see across other generative search engines and generative search LLM tools, Gemini is pulling in around 267 million global visits, 70 million visits to Claude, 60 million to Perplexity, and 30 million to Copilot directly via SimilarWeb. So most of it's going to ChatGPT. But this is that's a lot of traffic, and that's a lot of people spending a lot of time on all of these tools. So though Queen G is currently still on top, the LLM use is growing. And when we look at the sort of wider space around the web and how people are thinking about this, Gartner predicts that there could potentially be, this is a prediction, obviously they're not, if they knew the future, I'd ask them for lotto numbers. But they're predicting 25% drop in search engine use by 2026. Even if it's half that, that's still significant. And Gartner's also predicting that organic traffic overall could drop by as much as 50% in 2028. That's a lot, right? And as SEOs, that could potentially be panic stations. That could potentially be like, oh no, what are we going to do? Can you still hear me? Yes? Good. Okay. So that could potentially be panic stations, or we could take it as a challenge and we could just get into it because we're SEOs and we will not be defeated. So how do you optimize for generative search LLMs? Well, I think it's important to remember that there's a couple of different types. So you have information retrieval. This one. Yeah. Okay. So there's two different types. You have your information retrieval from pre-trained model responses, and then you have your search augmented information retrieval from pre-trained models. And essentially that's Gemini, Claude, or ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude in the pre-trained. And then we also have Perplexity and Copilot in the augmented pre-trained data LLM. And so for these ones, they behave slightly differently. So with the pre-trained data LLMs, you have essentially your data sets where you have a fixed training set. And this means that basically they were trained on a certain amount of data at a certain time, and that's sort of fixed there. And these will vary by platform. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini will have different training sets. And ChatGPT, if you ask ChatGPT on ChatGPT, what were you trained on? ChatGPT will go, oh, I've been trained on the best information. And they'll tell you all about everything that they were trained on. And oh yes, Sam at OpenAI is my favorite and he's so great. And ask me anything you like, I'm an open book. If you ask Gemini what they were trained on and they're like, what do you want to know? That's top secret. I can't tell you all of the things. So they vary by platform and they're different. And when you think about visibility, you also have to think about the data updates, right? So the training models will update at different times and this will affect your visibility. So when the training models are updated, that's when you might see updates and shifts in your visibility. I said that I also looked myself up on ChatGPT. Well, when ChatGPT first dropped, that was my first thing. I'm sure everybody else did the same. And I said, who's Crystal Carter? And they were like, who? What? And I was like, me? And they said, no, I don't know who you are. And then later on, a few months later, I looked it up and they were like, oh, Crystal Carter is from Wix, blah, 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 blah. So these things do improve, they do change, but it's a little bit like asking the encyclopedia, or asking someone to look at the Encyclopedia. The Encyclopedia Britannica would come out every year. And then next year they might have new information, just like the Oxford English Dictionary adds more words to it. Similarly, every time they update the training set, they will have more information on different things. So if somebody is in your team is saying, we're not ranking in ChatGPT, you need to ask them, when did you start trying to do this thing? Because if you tried to start doing this thing a month ago, then no, it's not going to be in ChatGPT yet because the training model. So when you think about the training data sets, you have to look at the training cutoff date. So Claude is April 2024. And if you talk to Claude, they'll say you can talk to me like an intelligently informed person from April 2024. Gemini is coy. And I think it's around about 2023. The Gemini also, I got it in this pre-trained set, but sometimes it pulls in some stuff from current search and sometimes it doesn't. It's very inconsistent, but mostly it sits more in the pre-trained category. ChatGPT is tiered. So if you are in the basic model or the basic free version of ChatGPT, you will be getting the oldest data set. If you are as you go up higher and higher and higher to the more pro levels, you will be getting the highest, most up-to-date data set. But the team at OpenAI are very, very open about all of this, and you can see all of the levels for which training set they're on. So you should expect your visibility to align with the training set timestamps. So when you're thinking about optimizations for pre-trained LLMs, you want to be thinking about monitoring your training sets and the updates and things like that. You also want to tailor your approach for each LLM and the kinds of information that they're getting, and don't necessarily expect to see brand new info in that space. Case in point, I was involved with a project called Site of Sites. And Site of Sites is a website that talks about other websites and sort of showcase of design and different websites. And it launched this spring. So I said to Claude, what is Site of Sites? And they said that Site of Sites is an archaeological term and it's anthropology and refers to the location of, no, not quite, no. So then I looked at OpenAI. And I said, OpenAI, what is Site of Sites? And they said, oh, it's not a commonly recognized term. It's metaphorical, it's artistic, no, not quite either. Then I asked Gemini, and again, Gemini is sometimey. I said, Gemini, what is Site of Sites? And they said, oh, well, it's in a general sense, it could refer to a figurative thing, literary, it could be this. April 24, no. But then they had, so literally it's a website called Site of Sites that curates collections. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Well done. But then I asked them again in September 24, this is an updated one. And again, they're able to update sometimes. I said, what is Site of Sites? And they said, it's a hub for web design inspiration. And I was very excited. And then and not only that, but it pulled out some of the key features that we have in our information. So they must have updated their data set between August and September. I was very pleased. This is fantastic. But I'm an SEO. So I said, can I get a link? Now, Gemini said to me, they said, I apologize for the oversight. Site of Sites is actually a section within the Behance platform. And here's how you find it. Go to behance.net. And that is not what I was looking for. Where is it going? It's not click. Okay, yeah. So yeah, and that's not what I was looking for. In fact, I didn't ask for Behance. I was asking for my website. So the thing that I did here brings me to another thing that's worth thinking about is that you can give feedback on this content. So I said to them, no, this is bad robot. That's a bad response. It's not factually accurate. Here's the URL, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that particularly for these ones, it's very important for you to give good and bad feedback for the content that you see about your website, because it is training and you're training it. And if you want to train it, you have to give it like you would to a dog or whatever. You have to give it treats when it does well. And you need to, tell it that it's not doing well when it's not doing well. So that's something that's worth thinking about. Also, when you get to augmented ones, there's additional things that you should be thinking about. So with augmented ones, we're thinking about Perplexity, Copilot, etc. And these ones will also have a fixed training set, but they will also be augmented by a crawl. And so when you think about those, the visibility there is affected by the web crawl. And it will very often have links within the references. So Perplexity, for instance, returns links for every single query that you make on Perplexity, unless you're asking it to update text, etc. And these, this is the backend for ChatGPT or for Copilot, and this is how they pull everything through, and they anchor the information, and they include information from GPT when they pull things through. So each one will have its own search engine. So Copilot is backed by Bing, and Perplexity has its own crawl, and which supports their search engine, and Gemini is backed by Google, but they're very obscure about how. And then when we get through, this also means that this is going to be affected by legacy rankings with this. So with Perplexity, it's still new. It's fairly new, just come out. But Bing is going to be supported by Bing's rankings. And Gemini is going to be supported by Google's rankings. But again, they're not clear on that. So for instance, this means that there can be a big difference between your rankings in Bing Copilot and your rankings in Google Gemini. So if you look at your ranking, this is an example I did where I compared 400 keywords on a website and how they were performing across Bing and Google. And you can see here that we have the number of index pages is 15 times less on Bing than it is on Google. We also have 26 fewer top 10 keywords. We also have 60 words that are ranking for number one on Bing, but we have 164 words that are ranking for number one on Google. So when you have the same website, you're going to see different crawl configuration, different ranking per site. So that means that your performance on the LLM that's based on these crawls will also be different. So when I look at site of sites, for instance, on Bing, when I Google or when I Bing it, I will get information. Then it shows the website and it shows the about page and it shows a couple of other pages as well. And when I type in site of sites into Copilot, I get the same, right? So I get this is site of sites. This is what it is. And then when I click on the sources, it gives me the about page, for instance, and it gives me the other page. And this supports the rankings that they have there. And also because it's Bing, it also has ads. So that's super fun. Where are we? Clicker, click. Like clicker. Okay. All right. So when we think about pre-trained model LLMs, or when we think about augmented ones, we also need to consider all of the things for the pre-trained model, but we also need to consider everything for augmented ones. So don't ignore your search engines rankings, and check your core queries regularly because they're going to be updating along with your search information, and also prioritize pages that show in the LLM. So like the one that I was showing with site of sites that had the about page that was showing in the LLM. That means that when I'm thinking about my internal linking, I should be prioritizing that page if I want to be optimizing for that LLM search engine. Now let's talk about a few optimizations for every LLM. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be super quick. So you want to optimize for crawl intent. You want to optimize for augmented LLMs first. And you want to manage your brand entities, and you want to be involved with the platforms. So remember that when you're thinking about your crawl, LLMs are not trying to click or rank your content. They're trying to interpret your content. This means that LLMs have different intent from both human users and from traditional search engines. So who are they? ChatGPT is very clear about which web crawlers they have. BingBot is the crawl user agent for Copilot. Gemini seems to be Google extended. Again, they're very coy about that. Perplexity has its own bot. Claude has its own bot as well. And when you're looking at ChatGPT, they're very, very open and they have all of their IPs publicly listed. So if you want to be looking for them and seeing if they're crawling you in your bot log reports, if you want to be looking at all of that sort of stuff, you can check those. Similarly, almost all web crawlers have Common Crawl Bot within their training set, so it's worth looking at those as well. And when we look at user agent data, we can optimize the crawl for these user agents. And the first port of call for that will be bot logs. Now, if you look at the way that Common Crawl, for instance, is crawled, and this is the Wix bot log report, you can see that it's coming fairly regularly. But the other thing that I find interesting is that when I compare the Common Crawl to the Googlebot crawl, it's actually crawling a lot more. So if you look at the long ones, these ones, those are the Common Crawl ones, and they're crawling about 69 pages per site, whereas Google's mobile bot is crawling 2, 3, 4 pages per site. So this is a super small site, and that's most of the site that it's crawling there. So then when we filter it by the bot, and we filter it by the date, and we can see that it's crawling lots of pages. It's crawling every page single time. But what I'm also noticing is that it's crawling a lot of unnecessary pages. And the thing that's important to remember is, again, that LLMs are not trying to click or rank your content. They're trying to interpret your content. So they don't need navigational pages. So it's worth going through, if you're particularly optimizing for some of these LLM bots, that, updating your robots.txt to remove anything that's not necessary for them to interpret your content and to find the most important pages on your site. Then we want to optimize for augmented LLMs first. And this has to do with time. As I was saying, the augmented ones are going to be updating more quickly. So that's why you'd want to think about those. It's not rocket science. You're going to try to rank the same way you'd normally rank. And when you're visible in augmented search and LLM, you're going to be more likely to be visible in the pre-trained model LLMs later on. Brand entities. And now we're going to talk about Barbie. So I was looking at the Barbie movie, and I was using TextRaiser, which is a great NLP tool. And I put the Barbie movie summary into TextRaiser. And what that does is it pulls out all of the entities in it. And even though the Barbie movie summary, which reads, Barbie and Ken are having the time of their lives in the colorful and seemingly perfect world of Barbie land. And then it goes on, et cetera, et cetera. Even though that's what that reads, what it pulls out is things like toy industry. The entities it pulls out are Mattel, it pulls out Fashion Doll, it pulls out doll brands. These are the things that it's pulling out. And when you reverse engineer that, when you go into one of these LLM tools and you say, name a fashion doll, Claude says Barbie. ChatGPT says Barbie as well. Copilot says Barbie, and then they also add in loads of ads because they love ads. And if you also ask Perplexity, name a fashion doll, they also name Barbie. If you ask Gemini, Gemini comes like, name a fashion doll, and they're like, here's a name for a fashion doll, and they say Barbie, but they say it's a classic name, and then they say you could also call it Zephyr or Luna or Ember, and I'm like, Gemini, guys, almost. But overall, pretty good. Why? Because Barbie is a really established IP, and their knowledge graph is full of information and connects all of those elements to that particular brand. And if you look on their Wikipedia page, it says Barbie is a fashion doll created by American businesswoman Ruth Handler, blah, 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 blah. And if you think about your knowledge graph and start putting emphasis on your knowledge graph, I think you're going to get a really far way to making sure that your brand performs really, really well on some of these, because LLMs are all trained on Wikipedia, every single one of them. And that's the entities that show up in the knowledge graph. And thus that's something that works really well for you. So even if you're not a huge brand, you can think about your knowledge panel for your Google business profile. You can think about it for Wikidata, for various different things. But it also means that you should claim knowledge panels. You should implement schema to help with that, and align your content and links with known entities. So for instance, if you have an alma mater, if you went to a university or whatever, those are all named entities. Those are all aligned entities. So if you were to think about contributing to your alumni newsletter, do that. That will help your brand. I'm nearly there. The other thing is we need to stop just meditating on ChatGPT and LLMs and Claude, et cetera, and start actually doing stuff. So get involved. If you're not seeing your brand in ChatGPT, build a custom GPT, and guess what? There's your brand in GPTs. Here's ours, Wix AI Web Builder, in there. 10,000. We've had 10,000 chats generated from this recently. Similarly, and the other thing is that those custom GPTs also show up in search. So if you look up consistent character, that shows up in search. It's a ranking, and there's thousands of pages that are ranking with custom GPTs. Perplexity has a tool for Perplexity pages where you can spin up a page about whatever it is that you're talking about. And not only that, but they get traffic. And also when you spin up that page, you can see what kinds of sources Perplexity are using in order to talk about that topic. And these are getting loads of traffic too. I'm going to be super quick. I know I'm running over. I'm so sorry. So the last bit, to monitor it, which is super important. Jess Schultz, in her infinite wisdom, recently shared on LinkedIn a fantastic regex, which helps you to understand and find the traffic that you're getting from some of these tools. And I tried it. I used it. It's great. This is what it looks like. If anybody wants to take a picture, get in there now. Jess Schultz also shared it recently. And also SEO Interactive are doing some great tracking of this as well. So it might be worth chatting to their team if you want to do this at scale as well. And with that, I hope you slay all day. Thank you very much.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.